A loyal dog starts guarding a secret hidden in his collar. A chilling note unveils a mystery that threatens their quiet town. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe our channel, Pause Verve. If this story touches your heart, please like the video and share it with others. The sun hadn't quite risen yet, but the soft pink glow creeping over the horizon was enough to coax Sarah Harper out of bed. She stretched, her bare feet brushing the cool hardwood floor of her modest suburban home in Willow Creek, a quiet town where everyone knew the bakery's muffin schedule by heart. Downstairs, a familiar jingle of tags announced her border collie, Max, already waiting by the front door. His black and white fur caught the dim light filtering through the window, and his bright amber eyes sparkled with the kind of eagerness only a dog could muster at 6 a.m. "Morning, buddy," Sarah said, her voice still thick with sleep. Max's tail whipped back and forth, a metronome of pure joy, as she clipped his leash to his worn leather collar. At 3 years old, Max was her constant, her shadow through the chaos of single motherhood, her confidant when the world felt too heavy. He'd been a gift from her late father, a scrappy puppy meant to keep her company after her divorce. Now Max was family, plain and simple. Their morning walks were a ritual, a sacred half-hour carved out before Sarah's daughter, Lily, woke up demanding pancakes or her favorite purple socks. The streets of Willow Creek were still, save for the occasional jogger or the hum of Mr. Peterson's sprinkler 2 houses down. Max trotted ahead, nose low to the ground, sniffing every mailbox post like it held the secrets of the universe. Sarah smiled, tugging her sweater tighter against the early fall chill. "You're going to wear out that snout one day," she teased. Max glanced back, his tongue lolling in what Sarah swore was a grin. He had a way of making the ordinary feel extraordinary, chasing leaves like they were rogue spies, barking at squirrels, with the conviction of a courtroom lawyer. Once he'd proudly dragged a soggy tennis ball from a storm drain, dropping it at Sarah's feet like a knight presenting a trophy. Lily, then barely 4, had clapped and declared him Max the Magnificent, a title that stuck. Today, Max's energy was infectious. He bounded toward the park at the end of their street, a small green oasis with a rickety bench and a willow tree that drooped like it was perpetually napping. Sarah let him off the leash, watching as he darted across the dew-soaked grass, his ears flopping with every leap. He circled back to her, dropping into a playful bow, inviting her to chase him. She laughed, pretending to lunge, though she knew her sneakers were no match for his speed. "Show off," she called, settling onto the bench. Max yipped, then tore off again, sniffing a patch of clover with the intensity of a detective. Sarah leaned back, breathing in the crisp air. These moments were her reset button. Work at the library was steady but demanding, and Lily's endless questions, "Why do stars twinkle? Can Max go to school?" kept Sarah's mind spinning. But here, with Max's joyful chaos and the world still half asleep, she could just be. She thought about the camping trip they'd taken last week, a rare getaway to Oregon's Cascade Mountains. Lily had squealed at every pine cone, and Max had romped through the forest like he was born for it, splashing in streams and napping by the campfire. Sarah had boarded him at a kennel for the last 2 days when she and Lily visited her sister in Portland. The separation had felt wrong, like leaving a piece of herself behind, but Max had come back wagging, his usual self. Or so she thought. As the sky brightened, Sarah clipped Max's leash back on. "Time to head home, Magnificent," she said, scratching behind his ears. He leaned into her touch, his warmth grounding her. They strolled back, Max pausing to sniff a hydrangea bush, while Sarah waved at Mrs. Callahan, who was already out, tending her roses. The neighborhood felt like a quilt, patched together with familiar faces, small kindnesses, and the occasional gossip about whose dog dug up whose tulips. Back home, Sarah unhooked Max's leash, and he made a beeline for his water bowl, lapping noisily. Lily's footsteps thumped overhead, a sign the morning chaos was about to begin. Sarah glanced at Max, who was now sprawled on his favorite rug, one paw twitching like he was dreaming of squirrels. "You're the best part of this place, you know that?" she said softly. Max's tail thumped once, as if he understood. She didn't know it yet, but something was different about Max. Something small hidden in the seams of that worn leather collar. something that would unravel the quiet comfort of their life in Willow Creek and pull Sarah into a mystery she never expected. For now, though, it was just another morning, with Max's warmth filling the house and Lily's voice calling, "Mom, where's my purple hat?" Sarah smiled, oblivious to the secret Max carried, and stepped into the day. The next few days unfolded in the usual blur of routine. Sarah shuffled between library shifts, Lily's school drop-offs, and Max's walks, which now felt like the only moment she could catch her breath. But by Thursday, something began to nag at her, a subtle shift she couldn't quite place. Max, her unshakably cheerful border collie, wasn't himself. It wasn't anything dramatic, not at first. He still wagged his tail when Lily burst through the door, still scarfed down his kibble with gusto. But there was a new wariness in his amber eyes, a hesitation that hadn't been there before their Oregon trip. It started with the collar. Sarah noticed it that evening while rinsing dishes, the kitchen filled with the clatter of Lily's crayons rolling across the table. Max was curled up by the back door, his favorite post-dinner spot, but when Sarah knelt to unclip his leather collar for his weekly bath, he stiffened. His ears flicked back, and he let out a soft, low whine. Not his usual playful protest, but something cautious, almost pleading. She froze, her hand hovering over the buckle. "What's wrong, buddy?" she asked, her voice light to mask the unease curling in her chest. Max shifted, pulling his head away just enough to keep the collar out of reach, his eyes locked on hers, steady and intense, like he was trying to tell her something she wasn't ready to hear. Sarah tried again, her fingers brushing the leather, but Max whined louder, scooting backward until his haunches hit the wall. The sound wasn't aggressive, not like a growl, but it carried a weight that made her heart skip. Max, her Max, the dog who let Lily drape him in paper crowns and once napped through a toddler's birthday party, didn't want her touching his collar. Okay, Sarah said, raising her hands like she was surrendering. No bath tonight. She sat, back on her heels, watching him. Max relaxed slightly, his tail giving a single uncertain thump, but he didn't break eye contact. The kitchen felt too quiet, the hum of the fridge suddenly loud. Lily, oblivious, hummed a made-up song about unicorns, her crayons scratching across paper. Sarah forced a smile and stood, brushing her hands on her jeans. "We'll figure it out, magnificent," she murmured, though the words felt hollow. That night, after tucking Lily into bed, Sarah sat on the couch with a mug of chamomile tea, Max sprawled at her feet. She kept replaying the moment in her head, the whine, the way he'd pulled away. It wasn't just the collar. On their morning walk, Max had lingered by the park's willow tree, sniffing the same spot for longer than usual, his body tense. When they passed the new neighbor's house, Mr. Callahan's, with its neatly trimmed hedges and always closed blinds, Max's ears had flattened, his stride slowing like he was bracing for something. Sarah had chalked it up to a stray cat, or a weird smell, but now she wasn't so sure. She leaned down, studying Max's collar from a distance. The leather was scuffed, the brass buckle dulled from years of use, but it looked the same as always. She'd bought it at a pet store when Max was a puppy, nothing fancy, just sturdy enough to survive his endless energy. He'd worn it through muddy fields, beach trips. Even that time he'd bolted after a rabbit and ended up in Mrs. Callahan's rose bushes. So why, after 3 years, was he acting like it was a stranger? Sarah sipped her tea, the steam curling under her chin. She thought about the boarding kennel in Portland, where Max had stayed during their last 2 days away. The place had seemed fine, clean, with a big play yard and staff who cooed over Max like he was royalty. But there was that new employee, Lily, the quiet one with the braid who'd lingered when Sarah picked Max up. She'd scratched Max's ears and said, "He's special, you know," her voice soft but deliberate. Sarah had smiled, assuming it was just small talk, but now the memory felt heavier, like a clue she'd missed. Max shifted in his sleep, his paws twitching like he was chasing something in a dream. Sarah reached out instinctively, then stopped herself, her hand hovering over his collar. The whine echoed in her mind, sharp and clear. She pulled back, wrapping her fingers around her mug instead. "What's going on with you, buddy?" she whispered. Max's eyes cracked open just for a moment, and in the dim glow of the lamp they seemed to carry a secret, something he'd seen or sensed that she hadn't. By morning, the unease had settled into Sarah's bones. Max ate his breakfast, but his tail didn't wag with its usual fervor. On their walk, he stayed closer to her side, his nose twitching like he was cataloguing every scent. When Sarah tried to adjust his collar, just a gentle tug to straighten it, he whined again, softer this time, but enough to make her stop. She crouched in the grass, ignoring the damp seeping through her jeans, and looked into his eyes. "You're trying to tell me something, aren't you?" she said, half expecting him to nod. The street was quiet, the early risers still tucked inside. Sarah glanced at Mr. Callahan's house across the way. His porch light was on, though it was well past dawn. She didn't know much about him, just that he'd moved in a month ago, kept to himself, and walked his little dog Tinker at odd hours. He'd waved once, a stiff gesture, and Max had stared at him like he was sizing him up. Sarah shook her head, feeling silly. She was reading too much into this, wasn't she? Dogs got weird sometimes. Maybe Max was just tired from the trip, but as they headed home, Max paused by the mailbox, his nose pressed to the ground. He pawed at the dirt, a low rumble in his throat, not a growl, but close. Sarah's pulse quickened. She knelt, brushing, her fingers over the spot, but found nothing. "What is it, Max?" she asked. He looked up at her, his gaze so steady it gave her chills. Whatever was wrong, it wasn't in her head. Max knew something, and it was tied to that collar. Sarah couldn't shake the image of Max's eyes, those amber pools that seemed to hold a quiet urgency. By Friday morning, his strange behavior had woven itself into her thoughts, a thread she couldn't unravel alone. He was still Max, trotting after Lily's stray crayons, nudging Sarah's hand for a scratch. But the collar thing wasn't fading. If anything, it was getting worse. When she reached for it after breakfast just to check the tags, Max didn't just whine. He backed away, his tail low, his body language screaming, "Don't." Sarah's stomach knotted. This wasn't her dog's usual stubborn streak. Something was wrong, and she needed answers. She called the vet's office before Lily was even out of her pajamas. Dr. Ellis, a kind-eyed woman who'd patched Max up after a run-in with a thorn bush last summer, had an opening at 10 a.m. Sarah hesitated, her thumb hovering over the phone. What was she going to say? "My dog won't let me touch his collar, and I think he's hiding something." It sounded absurd, like something out of a late-night conspiracy podcast. But Max's behavior was real, and Sarah trusted him more than she trusted her own doubts. "We're going," she told him, grabbing her keys. Max's ears perked, but his tail stayed still, a sign he wasn't thrilled. The Willow Creek Veterinary Clinic was a low brick building with a mural of cartoon cats and dogs on the side, the kind of place that smelled like antiseptic and peanut butter treats. Sarah led Max through the glass doors, his leash taut as he scanned the waiting room. A tabby and a carrier hissed from the corner, and a droopy basset hound eyed Max with mild curiosity. Sarah checked in, her cheeks warming as she mumbled, "It's about his collar." The receptionist, a young man with a nose ring, nodded like it was the most normal thing in the world, which somehow made her feel worse. In the exam room, Max sat close to Sarah's legs, his warmth grounding her as they waited. Dr. Ellis knocked and entered, her graying ponytail swinging as she crouched to Max's level. "Hey, Max the Magnificent," she said, offering a treat. Max took it politely but didn't wag, his eyes flicking to Sarah as if checking her reaction. Dr. Ellis straightened, her smile softening. "So, what's going on? You mentioned something about his collar?" Sarah took a breath, feeling like she was standing on a diving board. "He's been weird since we got back from our trip. We were in Oregon, and I boarded him for a couple of days. Ever since, he won't let me touch his collar. He whines, pulls away, sometimes even backs up. It's not like him at all." Her voice wavered, and she laughed nervously. "I know. It sounds crazy, but it's like he's protecting it or something." Dr. Ellis didn't laugh or raise an eyebrow. She nodded, jotting a note on her clipboard. "Dogs can be sensitive to changes, especially after boarding. Let's take a look. Can you try removing the collar, or should I?" Sarah hesitated, then knelt beside Max. "Buddy, we need to check, okay?" she said softly. She reached for the buckle, her fingers slow, but Max's whine came instantly, sharp and insistent. He shuffled backward, pressing against the wall, his eyes wide with something Sarah couldn't name. Fear, maybe, or a plea. "Whoa," Dr. Ellis said, her tone calm but curious. "That's definitely not his usual self. Mind if I try?" Sarah nodded, stepping back, her heart thudding. Dr. Ellis moved slowly, her hand open, palm up, like she was asking permission. Max watched her, his ears flat, but he didn't whine. When her fingers grazed the collar, though, he let out a low, rumbling sound, not a growl, but close enough to make Sarah's skin prickle. Dr. Ellis pulled back, her expression thoughtful. "Okay, Max. Message received." Sarah's throat tightened. He's never done this before. He lets Lily climb all over him, lets delivery guys pet him, everything. I thought maybe he's hurt, or there's something stuck in the collar, but... She trailed off, her hands twisting together. Dr. Ellis set her clipboard down and knelt again, studying Max from a safe distance. He doesn't seem in pain, and his body language isn't aggressive. It's more like he's guarding something. "You said this started after the boarding kennel?" "Yeah," Sarah said, her mind racing back to Portland. "It was a place called Paws and Pines, good reviews, clean, seemed fine. But there was this new employee, Lily, who was, I don't know, quiet but really focused on Max. I didn't think much of it then." Dr. Ellis nodded, her pen tapping her chin. "Could be he picked up a strange scent or had an experience there that's making him protective. Collars are personal for dogs, close to their neck, their identity. Or maybe there's something physical we're missing." Sarah swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think I'm overreacting?" Dr. Ellis met her gaze, her eyes steady. "You know Max better than anyone. If you say he's acting off, I believe you. Let's try one more thing. I can give him a mild sedative, just enough to relax him, so we can check the collar safely. If there's nothing there, we'll look at behavior or stress triggers. Sound okay?" Sarah nodded, though her stomach churned. The idea of sedating Max felt like a betrayal, but she needed to know. Dr. Ellis prepared a small dose, explaining each step as she worked. Max stayed still, his eyes on Sarah, trusting her even as the needle went in. Within minutes, his head drooped, his body easing, onto the exam table. Sarah stroked his fur, whispering, "It's okay, buddy." Dr. Ellis gently unbuckled the collar, her fingers careful like she was handling evidence. As the leather slid free, Sarah held her breath. Dr. Ellis turned the collar over, inspecting every inch, the buckle, the tags, the stitching. Then she paused, her brow furrowing. "Sarah," she said, her voice low, "there's something here." She pointed to the inner lining, where a tiny, uneven seam stood out, barely visible. With a pair of scissors, she carefully cut the thread, revealing a folded scrap of paper, no bigger than a postage stamp tucked inside. Sarah's heart stopped. "What is that?" she whispered, leaning closer. Dr. Ellis unfolded it with gloved fingers, revealing 4 words in neat blue ink. "Beware the newcomer." Sarah stared at the tiny slip of paper in Dr. Ellis's gloved fingers, the words, "Beware." The newcomer etched in blue ink like a whisper from a ghost. Her pulse thrummed in her ears, drowning out the hum of the vet clinic's air conditioning. The exam room, with its sterile white walls and faint smell of disinfectant, felt suddenly smaller, as if the note had sucked all the air out. Max, still groggy from the sedative, lay on the table, his chest rising and falling steadily. His collar, now empty of its secret, rested beside him, looking oddly ordinary. "What? What does that even mean?" Sarah asked, her voice cracking. She reached for the note, then stopped, her hand hovering like it might burn her. Dr. Ellis tilted her head, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "I don't know, Sarah. I've seen a lot in this job. Lost toys, matted fur, but a hidden note, that's a first." She set the paper on a sterile tray, as if it were evidence in a crime scene. "Any idea who it could be referring to?" Sarah's mind spun. The newcomer. The word felt sharp, like a splinter. She thought of Mr. Callahan, the new neighbor who'd moved in a month ago, with his stiff waves and his little dog Tinker, who barked at shadows. Max's odd behavior, his flattened ears, his tense stares at Callahan's house, flashed through her mind. But accusing someone based on a cryptic note felt like leaping off a cliff. "Maybe," she said slowly. "There's a new guy across the street, but I don't know him well." "Max has been weird around his house lately." Dr. Ellis nodded, her eyes flicking to Max, who stirred slightly, his paw twitching. "Could be a coincidence, or maybe Max picked up on something at the kennel that's tied to this. You mentioned that employee, Lily, right? She seemed attached to him." Sarah nodded, her thoughts drifting to the young woman at Paws and Pines. Lily's quiet intensity, the way she'd lingered with Max, saying, "He's special," now felt like a puzzle, piece that didn't quite fit. Yeah, she was different, but why would she hide a note in his collar, and why this message? Maybe she saw something she couldn't say out loud, Dr. Ellis offered, her tone careful. Or it could be a prank, someone's idea of a weird joke. Either way, Max's reaction suggests he's stressed about it. Dogs don't lie, they sense things we miss. She slid the note into a small plastic bag, handing it to Sarah. "You should keep this. Maybe show it to someone you trust, or even the police if it feels off." Sarah took the bag, the note's weight negligible but heavy in her hand. She looked at Max, his eyes half open now, cloudy but still locked on her. A surge of protectiveness washed over her. Whatever this was, Max had carried it, guarded it, and now it was her turn to figure out why. "Is he okay?" she asked, stroking his fur. Dr. Ellis smiled gently. "He's fine, just coming out of it. Keep an eye on him, maybe skip the collar for a day or two, see if he calms down." Back home, Sarah tucked the note into a kitchen drawer, out of Lily's reach. Her daughter was sprawled on the living room floor, coloring a picture of Max with a crown, oblivious to the morning's strangeness. Sarah tried to focus on making lunch, peanut butter sandwiches, Lily's favorite, but her eyes kept drifting to Max. He was awake now, lying by the back door, his gaze fixed on the yard. The pie. Collar sat on the counter, its empty seam a silent accusation. She hadn't put it back on, not yet. Max didn't seem to mind, but his alertness hadn't faded. Sarah replayed the trip in her head. The camping in Oregon had been perfect. Lily chasing fireflies, Max romping through ferns. The kennel had been a necessity, not a choice. Paws and Pines had glowing reviews, a cheerful staff, and a big yard where Max could play. But Lily, the new employee, stood out now. Her braid, her soft voice, the way she'd knelt by Max like they shared a secret. Had she slipped the note into his collar? And if so, why warn Sarah about a newcomer? Was it Callahan? Or someone else entirely? She glanced out the window at Callahan's house. His car was gone, but Tinker's faint yapping carried from the backyard. Sarah didn't know much about him, just that he was retired, kept his lawn pristine, and walked Tinker at dawn or dusk. He'd seemed harmless, if a bit distant, but Max's reactions weren't random. Dogs didn't invent threats. If he was tense around Callahan's house, there was a reason. Sarah sat at the table, the note's words echoing, "Beware the newcomer." It felt like something from a mystery novel, absurd and unsettling. She wanted to laugh it off, to chalk it up to a bored kennel worker's prank. But Max's whine, his refusal to let her touch the collar, was no joke. She pulled out her phone and searched for Paws and Pines, scrolling through photos of happy dogs and smiling staff. No sign of Lily. The website listed a manager, Karen, with their contact number. Sarah hesitated, then saved it. Maybe the kennel could shed light on Lily or the note. Lily bounded into the kitchen, holding up her drawing. "Look, Mom, Max is a king." Sarah forced a smile, her heart still racing. "He's definitely magnificent," she said, ruffling Lily's hair. Max's ears twitched, but he didn't move from his post by the door. Sarah watched him, a mix of love and unease swelling in her chest. Whatever this note meant, Max had carried it home, a message meant for her. She wasn't sure what to do next, but she knew one thing. She trusted Max, and he was trying to protect her. Sarah sat at the kitchen table that evening, the house quiet, except for the soft creak of the ceiling fan and Lily's muffled giggles. From the living room, where she was watching a cartoon about talking penguins, Max hadn't moved from his spot by the back door, his black and white fur blending into the shadows, his eyes fixed on the yard like a sentinel. The note, still tucked in its plastic bag in the drawer, seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its words, "Beware the newcomer," looping through Sarah's mind like a song she couldn't shake. She needed to understand where this had started, and her thoughts kept circling back to the trip to Oregon. The camping trip had been a rare escape, a chance to unplug and make memories with Lily. They'd pitched a tent in the Cascade Mountains, where the air smelled of pine and the stars felt close enough to touch. Lily had spent hours collecting treasure, smooth pebbles, twisted sticks, a feather she swore was from a magical bird. Max had been in his element, bounding through the underbrush, splashing in icy streams, his tail a constant blur. Sarah could still picture him sprawled by the campfire, his fur glowing orange. Lily curled against him as she whispered stories about forest fairies. But the last 2 days of the trip had been different. Sarah's sister, Emily, had invited them to Portland for a visit, and the campsite didn't allow dogs. Sarah had agonized over leaving Max, but Emily had found Paws and Pines, a boarding kennel just outside the city with a 5-star rating and photos of dogs romping in a grassy play yard. "He'll have a blast," Emily had said, and Sarah, reluctant but out of options, had agreed. Dropping Max off had felt like betraying him. He'd sat by her feet in the kennel's lobby, his eyes searching hers as she handed over his leash. "2 days, buddy," she'd promised, kissing his snout. "Then we're home." The kennel had seemed perfect. The lobby was bright, with chew toys scattered on the floor, and a bulletin board plastered with thank you notes from happy pet owners. The manager, Karen, had been warm and chatty, assuring Sarah that Max would get daily walks and plenty of playtime. But it was Lily, the young employee, not her daughter, who stood out. She'd been there when Sarah arrived, sweeping the floor, her long braids swinging as she moved. When Karen introduced her, Lily had knelt to Max's level, her hands gentle as she scratched his ears. "What a smart boy," she'd said, her voice soft but deliberate, her eyes lingering on him longer than seemed casual. Sarah hadn't thought much of it then. She'd been distracted juggling Lily's backpack and a checklist of Max's quirks. "He loves his blue ball, don't give him rawhide. He'll sulk if you skip his bedtime belly rub." But now, replaying the moment, Lily's intensity felt significant. She'd been new, Karen had said, a temp worker filling in for the week. When Sarah picked Max up, Lily had been there again, quieter this time, watching from the corner as Max bounded to Sarah, his leash trailing. "He's special, you know," Lily had said almost to herself before turning away. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her coffee gone cold. Had Lily slipped the note into Max's collar? It seemed like the only explanation, but why, and why beware the newcomer? Sarah thought of Mr. Callahan again, his reserved demeanor, the way his porch light stayed on past dawn, the faint hum she'd heard from his garage one night when she'd taken out the trash. Max's tension around his house was undeniable, but Sarah didn't know Callahan well enough to judge him. He was just there, a polite stranger with a yappy dog. She stood and opened the drawer, pulling out the plastic bag with the note. The paper was yellowed at the edges, the ink slightly smudged, as if it had been written in a hurry. Sarah turned it over, searching for anything she'd missed, a mark, a clue, but it was blank except for those 4 words. She glanced at Max, who hadn't budged, his ears twitching at some sound she couldn't hear. "What did you see, buddy?" she whispered. "What happened at that kennel?" Sarah grabbed her phone and opened the Paws and Pines website again, scrolling past the glossy photos to the About Us page. Karen's smiling face was there, along with a few other staff members, but no Lily. Sarah tapped the contact number, her thumb hovering. It was late, past business hours, but she needed to know if Lily was still there, if she'd left a trace, anything. She typed a quick email instead. "Hi Karen, I boarded my dog Max last week. I'm trying to reach an employee named Lily who was there. Do you have her contact info?" "Thanks, Sarah Harper." She hit send, her heart thudding. Max finally moved, padding over to her side and resting his chin on her knee. His warmth was a comfort, but his eyes held that same quiet urgency, urging her to keep going. Sarah scratched behind his ears, her fingers avoiding the collar still on the counter. "You carried that note for a reason, didn't you?" She said softly, "You're trying to protect us." Outside, a car rolled by, its headlights briefly sweeping across the kitchen blinds. Sarah tensed, her mind flashing to Callahan's house across the street. Was he the newcomer or was she chasing shadows? The trip to Oregon had been a bubble of joy, but something had followed them home, tucked into Max's collar like a seed, waiting to sprout. Sarah didn't know what it meant yet, but she knew Max was at the heart of it and she wasn't going to let him down. Sarah woke the next morning with a heaviness in her chest, the note's words, "Beware the newcomer," still echoing like a warning bell. Max was already by the front door, his leash in his mouth, his amber eyes bright but watchful. The routine of their walk felt like a lifeline, a way to ground herself in the familiar, but Sarah's gaze kept drifting to Mr. Callahan's house, across the street. Its tidy facade, white siding, clipped hedges, a single rocking chair on the porch, looked innocent enough, yet Max's behavior and the note had cast a shadow over it. She needed to understand why. She clipped Max's leash, leaving his collar off for now. The leather still on the kitchen counter like an artifact she wasn't ready to touch. Max didn't seem to mind. If anything, he moved lighter without it, though his alertness hadn't faded. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, the crisp Saturday air carried the scent of damp leaves and Mrs. Callahan's roses from down the block. Sarah tried to focus on the rhythm of Max's paws, the jingle of his tags, but her eyes kept sliding to the neighbor's house. The porch light was off, the blinds drawn, and Tinker's usual yapping was absent. It felt too still. Max led the way, his nose low, but when they neared Callahan's driveway, he slowed, his ears flattening. He didn't growl, but his body tensed, his tail dropping to a straight line. Sarah's pulse quickened. "What is it, buddy?" she whispered, crouching. To his level, Max's gaze was fixed on the garage, its side door barely visible behind a row of azaleas. A faint hum, like an appliance left running, drifted from that direction, then stopped. Sarah straightened, her skin prickling. She'd heard that sound before late at night, but had dismissed it as a neighbor's air conditioner. She tugged Max gently, urging him to keep walking, but he resisted, planting his paws and staring at the garage. Okay, she said, her voice low. She glanced around, nobody on the street, no cars passing. The neighborhood was still waking up, the only sound a distant lawnmower. Sarah took a step closer to Callahan's property, her heart thudding. Max stayed by her side, his focus unwavering. She didn't know what she was looking for, a sign, a clue, anything to explain why Max was so fixated, but she trusted his instincts. The garage door was closed, but a small window on the side caught the morning light, reflecting nothing but sky. Sarah squinted, trying to see inside, but it was too dark. Max gave a soft whine, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. Sarah's mind flashed to the note. Beware the newcomer. Callahan had moved in a month ago, right around the time Max started acting strange on walks. She didn't know much about him, retired maybe in his 60s, always dressed in pressed slacks and a polo like he was heading to a golf course. He'd waved once or twice, his smile tight, and Tinker, his scrappy little terrier, barked at Max like he was an intruder. Harmless, Sarah had thought. But was he? She pulled Max back, her hands shaky. "Let's go, buddy," she said, leading him toward the park. The rest of the walk was uneventful, Max sniffing his usual spots, but Sarah couldn't shake the image of that garage, the hum, Max's stare. Back home, she checked her email, hoping for a reply from Paws and Pines, but there was nothing. She sat at the kitchen table, Lily coloring nearby, and opened her laptop. If Callahan was the newcomer, she needed to know more about him. Quick search for Edward Callahan, Willow Creek, turned up little. A mention in a local newsletter about a new resident, a generic LinkedIn profile for an Edward Callahan who'd worked in logistics, now retired. Nothing suspicious, but nothing reassuring either. Sarah leaned back, chewing her lip. She wasn't a detective. She was a librarian who shelved books and read bedtime stories. But Max's behavior wasn't imagination, and that note wasn't a coincidence. She glanced at Max, now lying by the back door, his eyes half closed but still alert. "You know something, don't you?" she said softly. Lily looked up from her coloring. "Is Max okay, Mom?" she asked, her brow furrowed. Sarah forced a smile. "He's just being extra careful, sweetie. Like a superhero." Lily grinned, returning to her crayons, but Sarah's stomach twisted. She didn't want Lily worrying, but she couldn't ignore this anymore. That afternoon, Sarah took Max for another walk, this time deliberately passing Callahan's house. She told herself it was just to observe, to see if Max reacted again. The street was busier now, kids biking, a neighbor raking leaves. Callahan's car, a silver sedan, was in the driveway, and as Sarah approached, the front door opened. Callahan stepped out, Tinker on a leash, his small frame dwarfed by Callahan's height. Max froze, his ears back, a low rumble in his throat. "Morning," Callahan called, waving. His voice was friendly, but his eyes lingered on Max a beat. "Too long." Sarah waved back, her throat dry. "Nice day, huh?" she said, forcing cheer. Tinker yapped, straining at his leash, and Max's rumble deepened, though he didn't move. Callahan chuckled, tugging Tinker back. "This one's got too much energy. Your dog's a good one, though, well-trained." "Thanks," Sarah said, her smile tight. She nudged Max to keep walking, her heart racing. Callahan's words were normal, neighborly, but Max's reaction wasn't. As they rounded the corner, Sarah glanced back. Callahan was still standing. There, watching them, Tinker quiet now. The hum from the garage started again, faint but unmistakable. Back home, Sarah sat on the couch, Max at her feet. She didn't know what to make of Callahan. Polite on the surface, but Max didn't trust him. And that note had come from somewhere. She thought of Lily at the kennel again, her cryptic comment about Max being special. Had she seen Callahan? There. Was he connected to whatever had spooked Max? Sarah didn't have answers, but she had Max, and his instincts were louder than her doubts. She needed to dig deeper, to understand what her dog was trying to protect her from. The weekend passed in a haze of unease. Sarah's thoughts tangled around the note, Max's behavior, and Mr. Callahan's unreadable gaze. Sunday morning brought a drizzle, the kind that clung to everything, turning Willow Creek streets into a glossy painting. Sarah stood at the kitchen window, sipping coffee, watching Max pace the backyard. He hadn't worn his collar since the vet visit, and while he seemed less tense without it, his vigilance hadn't waned. His nose twitched, tracking invisible scents, and every few minutes he'd pause, staring toward Callahan's house, like it held a puzzle only he could solve. Sarah checked her email again, hoping for a reply from Paws and Pines, but her inbox was empty except for a library reminder and a coupon for dog treats. She sighed, setting her mug down beside the plastic bag with the note. "Beware the newcomer." The words felt heavier now, like a stone sinking deeper into still water. Max's reaction to Callahan wasn't random, she was sure of it, but she needed more than a gut feeling and a cryptic message. She needed proof, or at least a thread to pull. "Mom, can Max come play?" Lily called from the living room, her voice bright over the clatter of plastic blocks. Sarah smiled, grateful for her daughter's oblivious cheer. "In a bit, sweetie. He's on guard duty." Lily giggled, and Sarah's heart ached. She wanted to keep this world simple for Lily, full of crayons and superhero dogs, but Max's wariness was pulling her into something darker, and she couldn't ignore it. Sarah decided to act. If the kennel was the starting point, she'd go back there, ask about Lily, and see if anyone remembered anything odd. She bundled Lily into a raincoat, grabbed Max's leash, and drove the 2 hours to Portland, the windshield wipers thumping like a heartbeat. Max sat in the back, his nose pressed to the window, while Lily chattered about a school project involving glitter and glue. Sarah nodded along, her mind elsewhere, replaying Max's whine, the note, Callahan's lingering stare. Pause. And Pines looked just as it had a week ago, cheerful, clean, with a sign boasting Happy Paws, Happy Hearts. The lobby smelled of lavender and kibble, and a golden retriever lounged by the counter, tail thumping. Karen, the manager, was there, her smile widening when she saw Max. "Well, look who's back. Hey, Max." She knelt, offering a treat, but Max only sniffed it, his eyes scanning the room. Sarah's stomach tightened. Even here he was on edge. "Hi, Karen," Sarah said, keeping her tone light. I was hoping to ask about someone who worked here last week. Lily? She was new, helped with Max. Karen's smile faltered, just for a second before she stood brushing her hands on her apron. Lily, yeah, she was a temp, only here a few days. Nice girl, loved the dogs, but she left kind of suddenly. Why do you ask? Sarah hesitated, Lily's coloring book tucked under. Her arm as her daughter wandered to pet the retriever. Max has been acting strange since we got back. I found something in his collar, and I wondered if Lily might know anything. She didn't mention the note, not yet. Karen's brow furrowed. Strange how? He seemed fine here, played. A lot, ate well. Lily took him on extra walks, said he was her favorite. She paused, then added, she did ask a lot of questions about the dog's owners now that I think about it. Where they lived, that kind of thing. I figured she was just curious. Sarah's pulse quickened. Did she mention anyone else? Maybe a man, older, tall? She was fishing, picturing Callahan, but Karen shook her head. Not that I recall. We had a few visitors that week. People picking up pets, checking the place out. Nothing unusual. Sarah nodded, disappointed, but not surprised. She thanked Karen, bought a treat for Max and left. Lily skipping ahead as Max stayed close, his ears alert. On the drive home, Sarah's mind churned. Lily's sudden departure, her focus on Max, the note, it all pointed to something deliberate. But how did Callahan fit in? Back in Willow Creek, she took Max for his evening walk, the rain now a faint mist. They passed the park, and Max tugged toward the old willow tree, his nose low. He paused at the base of a nearby bench, a weathered wooden one Sarah had sat on 100 times. She knelt, her hands cold, and felt under the slats. Her fingers brushed. Something taped to the underside, a small folded paper. Her breath caught. She peeled it free, unfolding it under the glow of a street lamp. In the same neat blue ink, he's not who he seems. Sarah's knees weakened. She looked at Max, who sat beside her, his gaze steady, as if he'd known it was. There. How did you... She started, then stopped. The note wasn't random. Someone, Lily maybe, had left it for her, and Max had led her to it. But why? And who was he? Sarah tucked the note into her pocket, her mind racing. Callahan's face flashed in her head, his polite wave, the hum from his garage, Tinker's frantic barking. She wanted to confront him, to demand answers. But what would she say? My dog found a note and I think you're hiding something. It was too flimsy, too wild. Yet Max's instincts were real, and now there was a second note, another piece of a puzzle she didn't understand. As they walked home, Max stayed close, his warmth a quiet anchor. Sarah glanced at Callahan's house, dark except for a faint flicker in the garage window, like a candle or a screen. Her heart thudded. She didn't know if Callahan was dangerous or if Lily was playing some strange game. But the mystery was deepening, and Max was at its heart. She needed to keep going, to follow his lead, even if it scared her. Sarah's world felt like it was tilting. The second note, he's not who he seems, burning a hole in her pocket as she and Max walked. Home through the misty dusk. The quiet streets of Willow Creek, once a comfort, now seemed to hum with secrets, and Max, her loyal border collie, was the only anchor she could trust. His steady presence, the soft click of his claws on the sidewalk, grounded her. But his unwavering alertness, ears pricked, eyes scanning, kept her on edge. Whatever was happening, Max was at the center of it, and Sarah knew she needed to lean into his instincts, to rebuild the unspoken bond that had always guided them. Back home, Sarah locked the door and slid the new note into the kitchen drawer. Beside the first, the plastic bag crinkling like a warning. Lily was already in her pajamas, sprawled on the couch with a stuffed unicorn, her eyelids drooping as the TV played a lullaby version of a pop song. Sarah kissed her forehead, tucking a blanket around her, then turned to Max, who sat by the back door, his gaze fixed on the yard. The collar still lay on the counter untouched, but Sarah didn't need it to feel the weight of what Max was carrying. She knelt beside him, her hand hovering over his fur. "Hey, buddy," she said softly, waiting for his eyes to meet hers. They did, amber and deep, carrying a quiet intensity that made her throat tighten. "You're trying to tell me something, aren't you? I'm listening now." Max's tail gave a slow wag just once, and he leaned into her touch as she scratched behind his ears. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a pact, a promise, to trust each other through whatever this was. Sarah spent the next day watching Max more closely, tuning into his signals like a radio searching for a faint station. She kept his collar off, letting him roam the house and yard freely, hoping it would ease his tension. Max seemed to appreciate it, his movements looser, but his vigilance never faded. When they walked to the park, he didn't just sniff. He searched, pausing at specific spots, the willow tree, a lamppost, the bench where the second note had been. Each time he'd look at Sarah, as if waiting for her to catch up. At home, Sarah sat on the living room floor with Max, tossing his blue ball, his favorite. He chased it with less of his usual gusto, but when he brought it back, he dropped it at her feet and sat, staring like he was testing her. She rolled the ball again, then tried something new. "Max, where's the note?" she asked, half joking, pointing to the kitchen. To her surprise, he trotted to the drawer, pawing at it with a soft whine. Sarah's jaw dropped. "You're kidding me," she whispered, opening the drawer to show him the notes. Max nudged her hand, his nose warm, against her skin. "Okay, you're officially smarter than me," she said, laughing despite the chill running through her. She pulled out a treat, rewarding him, and Max wagged his tail, but his eyes stayed sharp, urging her to keep going. Sarah felt a surge of warmth, not just for his cleverness, but for his trust. Max wasn't just reacting. He was guiding her, and she needed to meet him halfway. That evening, Sarah took Max to the backyard, letting him roam while she sat on the porch steps. The air was cool, the sky streaked with purple. Max sniffed along the fence, pausing near the corner closest to Callahan's property. He didn't bark, but his body stiffened, his ears flicking toward the neighbor's garage. Sarah followed, his gaze, her heart thudding. The hum was there again, faint, like a distant appliance, and a flicker of light danced behind the garage window. Max looked back at her, his expression clear. "Pay attention." Sarah stood, her hands clenching. She wanted to march over and demand answers, but she knew it was reckless. Instead, she called Max over and sat with him, her hand resting on his back. "You see something I don't you?" she said. Max leaned into her, his warmth steadying her racing pulse. She thought of the notes of Lily at the kennel, of Callahan's polite but distant demeanor. Max had sensed something from the start, and his protectiveness wasn't just instinct. It was a message. She started small, building their connection. During walks, she let Max lead, following his tugs toward certain spots, noting where he lingered. At the park, he circled the willow tree again, pawing at the roots. Sarah checked but found nothing, yet she praised him, slipping him a treat. "Good boy," she said, and Max's tail wagged, his eyes bright with purpose. At home, she hid treats around the house, turning it into a game to sharpen his focus. Each time he found one, he'd look at her, waiting for the next challenge, and Sarah felt their bond deepen, a silent language growing stronger. By Monday, Sarah felt safer with Max by her side, his presence a shield against the unknown. She still didn't know who the newcomer was or what Lily had meant, but Max's signals were clear and she trusted them. When they passed Callahan's house on their evening walk, Max's ears flattened again, his body low. Sarah didn't wave this time. Her eyes on the garage, where the hum was louder, the flicker brighter. Whatever was happening, Max was her guide, and she wasn't alone. Sarah woke Tuesday morning with a clarity she hadn't felt in days, Max's steady presence fueling her resolve. The notes, "Beware the newcomer and he's not who he seems," sat in their plastic bag in the kitchen drawer, silent but insistent. Like a heartbeat she couldn't ignore. Max, her border collie, was more than a companion now. He was her partner, his instincts sharper than her own. His focus on Mr. Callahan's house, the way he tensed at the hum from the garage, had shifted from unsettling to urgent. Sarah knew. She needed to dig deeper, to find something tangible to connect the notes to Callahan, or prove Max's wariness wrong. She started the day as usual, walking Max through Willow Creek's quiet streets, the air crisp with the promise of fall. Max led with purpose, his nose low, ears flicking at every sound. Sarah let him guide her, trusting the bond they'd strengthened over the past days. When they passed Callahan's house, Max slowed, his body low, eyes locked on the garage. The hum was there again, faint but unmistakable, and the flicker of light behind the window pulsed like a signal. Sarah's skin prickled. Max gave a soft whine, looking back at her, urging her to notice. "Okay, buddy," she whispered, her heart thudding. She didn't linger. Callahan's car was in the driveway, and she didn't want to be seen staring. But Max's reaction was another piece of the puzzle. Back home, Sarah checked her email, hoping for a reply from Paws and Pines, but the inbox was empty. She sat at the kitchen table, Lily at school, the house quiet except for Max's soft pacing. The notes, Max's behavior, Callahan's garage, it all pointed to something, but she needed more. Sarah decided to take Max to the park, the place where he'd led her to the second note. Maybe he'd find another clue, or maybe she was grasping at straws. Either way, she trusted him. The park was busier today, kids kicking a soccer ball, a jogger circling the path. Max tugged toward the willow tree, his nose to the ground, then veered to a cluster of benches near the playground. Sarah followed, her pulse quickening. He stopped at a trash can, not the fancy kind with a lid, but an open metal one overflowing. With coffee cups and wrappers, Max poured at the base, his whine sharp and focused. Sarah knelt, ignoring the damp grass soaking her jeans, and peered under the can. Taped to the underside, barely visible, was another folded paper. Her breath caught. She peeled it free, her fingers trembling, and unfolded it under the shade of the willow. In the same blue ink, the words, "Check the garage." Sarah's knees buckled. She sat back on her heels, staring at the note, Max sitting beside her, his gaze steady as if he'd known it was there all along. "How do you do that?" she whispered, half laughing, half awestruck. Max's tail thumped once, his eyes never leaving her. The note felt like a directive, a push toward Callahan's garage, where the hum and flicker had become a constant in her mind. But it also raised questions. Who was leaving these notes? Lily from the kennel seemed the likely answer, but why hide them in places only Max could find? And why target Callahan? Or was it even him? Sarah tucked the note into her pocket, her mind racing. The garage. She'd heard the hum, seen the light, felt Max's tension, but walking up to Callahan's door and asking to see inside was out of the question. It was too bold, too risky. She needed a way to investigate without tipping him off. She thought of the late-night hum, the way Callahan's porch light stayed on past dawn, Tinker's frantic barking. Small details, but they added up, and Max's instincts tied them together. Back home, Sarah sat on the couch, Max at her feet, the new note beside the others in the drawer. She pulled up a local forum on her laptop, scrolling through posts about lost cats and garage sales, hoping for anything on Callahan. Nothing. She typed his name into a search engine again, but the results were the same, barely a trace. Frustrated, she closed the laptop and looked at Max. "You're better at this than Google," she said, scratching his ears. He leaned into her, his warmth easing the knot in her chest. Sarah decided to watch Callahan's house more closely. That evening, she took Max for a walk, timing it for dusk when Callahan usually walked Tinker. As they passed his house, the garage light flickered again, the hum louder now, like a machine warming up. Callahan stepped out, Tinker on his leash, and waved. "Evening," he called, his voice cheerful. Sarah nodded, her smile tight, Max's body stiff beside her. Tinker yapped, and Max's ears flattened, but he didn't react beyond a low rumble. As they walked on, Sarah glanced back. Callahan was watching them, his smile gone, Tinker pulling at the leash. The hum stopped abruptly, the garage light dimming. Sarah's stomach twisted. She didn't know what was in that garage, but the note, "Check the garage," was no coincidence. Max had led her to it, just as he'd led her to the others. She needed to find a way to see inside, to understand what Max was sensing, but the thought of sneaking onto Callahan's property made her palms sweat. For now, she'd keep watching, keep trusting Max, and wait for the right moment. Sarah's heart hadn't stopped racing since finding the third note, "Check the garage." Its words now a drumbeat in her mind. Max, her border collie, seemed to sense her tension, staying closer than ever, his amber eyes tracking her every move. The hum from Mr. Callahan's garage, the flickering light, Max's unwavering focus. It all pointed to something hidden, something Max had been trying to warn her about since the note in his collar. By Wednesday evening, Sarah knew she couldn't keep circling the mystery from a distance. She needed to face Callahan, to see his reaction, to find some crack in the polite facade that might confirm or dispel her suspicions. The idea of confronting him made her stomach churn. She wasn't bold by nature. She was the mom who mediated playground disputes, not the one who knocked on a neighbor's door demanding answers. But Max's instincts were undeniable, and the notes, 3 now, each, more pointed than the last, felt like a call to action. Sarah didn't have a plan, not really. Just a vague hope that a conversation might reveal something, anything to explain the hum, the light, or why Max stiffened every time they passed Callahan's house. She waited until after dinner, when Lily was tucked in bed, her unicorn nightlight casting a soft glow. Max sat by the front door, his leash in his mouth, as if he knew they were about to do something big. Sarah clipped the leash, leaving his collar off, and took a deep breath. "Stay with me, buddy," she said, scratching his ears. Max's tail gave a single wag, his eyes steady, ready. The night was cool, the street quiet except for the distant chirp of crickets. Callahan's porch light was on as always, and the garage window flickered with that eerie, pulsing light. Sarah crossed the street, her sneakers silent on the asphalt, Max at her side. Her heart thudded as she approached Callahan's driveway, the hum from the garage louder now, like a machine cycling on and off. She hesitated, glancing at Max, who stared at the garage door, his body tense but calm, urging her forward. She couldn't just peek inside. That was too risky. But she could knock, play the concerned neighbor, maybe get a glimpse of his reaction. She straightened her shoulders, channeling Max's quiet confidence, and rang the doorbell. The chime echoed, followed by Tinker's sharp yapping from inside. Sarah's mouth went dry. Max sat beside her, ears flat, but he didn't whine or pull away. The door opened, and Callahan stood there, his tall frame filling the doorway, a mug of tea. In one hand, he wore a navy polo and slacks, his silver hair neatly combed, but his eyes narrowed slightly when he saw Max. "Sarah, right?" he said, his smile polite but thin. "Everything okay?" Sarah forced a smile, her voice steadier than she felt. "Hi, Mr. Callahan. Yeah, I heard a weird noise from your garage earlier, like a hum or something. I thought it might be a loose wire or I don't know, something electrical. Just wanted to check." It was a flimsy excuse, but it was all she had. Max shifted, his gaze locked on Callahan, a low rumble in his throat. Callahan's smile didn't waver, but his grip on the mug tightened, just enough for Sarah to notice. "Oh, that," he said, chuckling. "It's just my model train setup. Got a new transformer and it's a bit noisy when it runs. Nothing to worry about." He stepped back, gesturing inside. "Want to take a look? Might put your mind at ease." Sarah's pulse spiked. The invitation was friendly, almost too friendly, and every instinct screamed caution. Max's rumble deepened, his body inching closer to her. She glanced at the garage, the flickering light still visible through the window, and shook her head. "Oh no, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a hazard or anything. Thanks, though." She took a step back, her hand tightening on Max's leash. Callahan nodded, his eyes flicking to Max again. "Smart dog you've got there. Keeps a close eye on things, doesn't he?" His tone was light, but there was an edge to it, a weight Sarah couldn't place. Tinker yapped from the hallway, and Callahan turned, calling, "Quiet, Tink." When he faced Sarah again, his smile was back, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, I appreciate the neighborly concern. Let me know if you hear anything else." "Will do," Sarah said, her voice tight. She tugged Max gently and they retreated down the steps, the hum from the garage following them like a shadow. As they crossed the street, Sarah glanced back. Callahan was still in the doorway, watching, his mug steaming in the cool air. The garage light flickered once, then went dark, the hum cutting off abruptly. Max gave a soft whine, pressing against her leg. Back home, Sarah locked the door and sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. Max lay at her feet, his eyes on her, as if waiting for her to process what had just happened. Callahan's explanation made sense. Model trains could hum, could flicker, but it felt too neat, too rehearsed. And his eyes on Max, the way he'd tensed at the mention of the noise, didn't match the friendly neighbor act. Sarah pulled the notes from the drawer, spreading them out. Beware the newcomer. He's not who he seems. Check the garage. They were leading her here, but she still didn't know why. She thought of Lily at the kennel, the one link to the notes. Callahan's offer to show her the garage could have been genuine, but Max's reaction, his rumble, his alertness, said, otherwise. Sarah didn't know if she'd uncovered anything or just made herself a target, but one thing was clear. Max was her guide, and he wasn't letting her ignore the truth. Sarah barely slept that night, her mind replaying the confrontation. With Mr. Callahan, his tight smile, the way his eyes lingered on Max, the too perfect explanation about model trains. The hum from his garage, the flickering light, and Max's low rumble had left her rattled. The three notes, beware the newcomer. He's not who he seems. Check the garage. Now a chorus urging her to act. Max, her border collie, stayed by her, side curled up on the rug beside her bed. His presence a quiet reassurance, even as his alertness mirrored her own. By morning, Sarah knew she couldn't stop now. She needed answers, and the trail led back to Lily, the kennel worker who'd likely left the notes. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, the notes spread before her, Max lying at her feet. Lily, her 6-year-old, was at school, leaving the house quiet, except for the soft drip of the coffee maker. Sarah's email to Paws and Pines had gone unanswered, and calling again felt futile. She needed to find Lily, to understand why she'd hidden those messages in Max's collar and the park, and what she knew about Callahan. Sarah opened her laptop, searching for Lily Paws and Pines Portland and variations, but nothing surfaced. No LinkedIn, no social media, just the kennel's website with its generic staff photos. Frustrated, Sarah tried a different angle. She remembered Karen, the kennel manager, mentioning Lily was a temp, possibly a college student. Sarah searched local Portland colleges, skimming student directories and community boards, but Lily was too common, and she had no last name. Then, on a whim, she checked a regional pet forum, a place where kennel workers and dog trainers often posted. Buried in a thread about summer jobs, a user named Lily Paws had commented, "Loved my week at Paws and Pines. Dogs are the best, but some people give weird vibes. Ask me about it." The post was dated the day after Sarah picked up Max. Sarah's pulse quickened. She created an account and sent a private message. "Hi, I think you met my dog Max at Paws and Pines. I need to talk about something you might have left in his collar. Please, it's important." She included her phone number, hoping it wasn't too forward. Max lifted his head, sensing her tension, and nudged her hand. "We're getting closer, buddy," she said, scratching his ears. His tail thumped, but his eyes stayed sharp, as if he knew the stakes. By afternoon, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Lily, can we meet? Somewhere public. I'll explain." Sarah's heart leapt. She replied, suggesting a Portland cafe the next day, a 2-hour drive, but worth it. Lily agreed, adding, "Bring Max. He'll remember me." Sarah stared at the message, a mix of relief and apprehension washing over her. Max, lying by the back door, seemed to sense the shift, his ears perking as if he'd heard Lily's name. The drive to Portland felt endless. Max in the back seat, his nose to the window, Lily coloring beside him. Sarah had told her daughter they were visiting a dog friend, keeping it light to shield her from the truth. The cafe, a cozy spot with outdoor tables, was busy with students and dog walkers. Sarah spotted Lily immediately, her long braid, her nervous glance around the patio. Max wagged his tail, pulling toward her, his whine soft but excited. "He remembers you," Sarah said, approaching, Lily clutching a leash. Lily knelt, scratching. Max's ears, her smile shaky. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, then stood, meeting Sarah's gaze. "Thanks for coming. I didn't know if you'd find the notes." Sarah's breath caught. "So it was you. Why? What's going on with Callahan?" Lily glanced around, lowering her voice. "Can we sit? It's complicated." They took a table, Max lying under it, his eyes on Lily. She fidgeted, twisting her braid. I was only at Paws and Pines a week, filling in. I overheard something I wasn't supposed to. Callahan, he came by, said he was checking the place for his dog Tinker, but he wasn't there to board. He was asking about tracking devices, small ones like for pets. He talked to someone on the phone in the parking lot, said he was testing them, needed dogs with strong instincts. I saw him slip something into a kennel log like he was marking specific dogs. Max was one of them. Sarah's stomach dropped. Tracking devices? For what? Lily shook her head. I don't know exactly. I think it's some kind of experiment. Behavioral, maybe surveillance. He mentioned data collection and response patterns. It sounded wrong. I wanted to warn someone, but I was scared. I didn't know who to trust, so I used Max's collar. He was so smart, so alert. I figured his owner would notice. Sarah leaned back, processing. The other notes in the park, the trash can. That was you too. Lily nodded. I left them after I quit, hoping you'd keep looking. Callahan's not who he seems. He's not just a retiree. I think he's working for someone, testing these devices on dogs like Max to see how they react, what they can detect. Max shifted, his nose brushing Sarah's knee as if confirming Lily's words. Sarah's mind raced. The hum, the flickering light. It could be equipment, not model trains. Max's protectiveness, his focus on the garage made sense now. Why didn't you go to the police, she asked. Lily's eyes dropped. I tried, anonymously, but they said I had no proof. And Callahan, he saw me listening. I got a weird call after I quit, someone saying to stay quiet. I've been crashing with friends, keeping low. Sarah looked at Max, his steady gaze anchoring her. Lily's story was wild, but it fit. Max's behavior, the notes, Callahan's odd demeanor. She didn't have all the pieces, but she had. Enough to know Max had sensed danger from the start, and Lily had risked everything to warn her. Sarah drove back from Portland with a whirlwind of emotions, Lily's revelations about Mr. Callahan and the tracking devices spinning in her mind. Max, her loyal border collie, sat in the back seat, his head resting on Lily's booster seat, his amber eyes calm but watchful. Her daughter, oblivious to the weight of the day, hummed a tune, coloring a picture of Max with a superhero cape. The notes, "Beware the newcomer, he's not who he seems, check the garage," had led Sarah to this moment, and Max had been her guide, his instincts uncovering a truth she never could have imagined. Now, she had to act, to protect her family, and her dog, and to ensure Callahan's actions didn't harm others. Back in Willow Creek, Sarah wasted no time. She called the local police, her voice steady as she explained the notes, Max's behavior, and Lily's account of Callahan's suspicious activities at Paws and Pines. The officer, a kind but skeptical woman named Sergeant Rivera, listened patiently, jotting notes. "It's unusual, I'll give you that," Rivera said. "No hard evidence yet, but we'll look into it. Can you get this Lily to make a statement?" Sarah shared Lily's contact, promising to follow up. She also emailed Lily, urging her to speak with the police, and Lily replied quickly, "I'm scared, but I'll do it. Max deserves that." Sarah knew waiting for the police wasn't enough. She needed to keep Max safe and ensure Callahan didn't suspect she was onto him. She avoided his house on walks, taking longer routes through the park. Max trotting beside her, his alertness now a comfort rather than a mystery. At home, she kept the blinds half drawn, watching for any sign of Callahan's silver sedan or the flickering light in his garage. The hum was quieter now, or maybe she was imagining it, but Max still paused by the fence, his ears flicking toward Callahan's property. A week later, Sergeant Rivera called. "We spoke to your friend Lily and checked on Callahan," she said. "He's Edward Callahan, retired logistics consultant, no criminal record. But we found something odd. A tip led us to a small operation in Portland. Nothing major, but a company testing micro-tracking devices on pets without proper permits. Callahan was a contractor, installing prototypes at kennels, including Paws and Pines. It's not illegal per se, but it's unethical, and we're working with state regulators to shut it down." Sarah's breath caught. "Was Max part of it?" Rivera hesitated. "Possibly. The devices were meant to monitor behavior, see how dogs respond to certain signals. Your dog's sharp, Might have sensed something off. We're still investigating. But Callahan's been asked to leave town while we sort it out. Sarah thanked her, relief flooding her, though questions lingered. The operation was small, Rivera said, likely a trial run, but it explained the notes, Lily's fear and Max's protectiveness. That evening, Sarah sat on the porch with Max, the sky painted with sunset pinks and golds. Callahan's house was dark, his sedan gone, Tinker's yapping absent. Word around the neighborhood was he'd moved abruptly, citing family reasons. Sarah didn't care why. She was just glad he was gone. Max rested his head on her lap, his warmth a quiet victory. "Oh, you knew, didn't you?" she whispered, scratching his ears. "You kept us safe." Max's tail thumped, his eyes soft, the tension finally easing from his frame. Sarah thought of Lily, who'd risked so much to warn her. She sent a thank you text, promising to stay in touch, and Lily replied with a photo of her own dog, a scruffy mutt captioned, inspired by Max. Sarah smiled, her heart full. The mystery had started with Max's collar, a secret he'd carried home, and ended with a truth that protected not just them, but other dogs too. She decided to act on that gratitude. The next day, she and Lily visited the local animal shelter, donating a check in Max's name to fund training programs for rescue dogs. Lily, clutching Max's leash, beamed as they played with a litter of puppies, Max romping like his old self, chasing a squeaky toy with boundless joy. Back home, life settled into a new rhythm. Sarah put Max's collar back on, its seams now empty, a symbol of their journey. He wore it proudly, his tail wagging as they walked the park, no longer pausing at the willow tree or the trash can. The notes were tucked away, a reminder of Max's bravery, but Sarah didn't need them to feel the bond they'd forged. Max was her hero, her magnificent, and every bark, every nudge was a promise they'd face anything together. One evening, as Sarah and Lily tossed a ball for Max in the backyard, Lily giggled. "Max is the best detective." Sarah laughed, pulling her daughter close. "He's the best everything," she said, watching Max leap for the ball, his fur glowing in the twilight. The neighborhood felt whole again, the shadows lifted, and Sarah knew it was because of one dog, one heart, who'd refused to let a mystery go unsolved. Max bounded back, dropping the ball at her feet, his eyes bright with love, and Sarah felt the warmth of home in every wag of his tail.